So this year, as you'll probably all appreciate, this has been the question most often asked whenever I've turned up anywhere or gone to any presentations: is the New Zealand soft plastic recycling scheme sustainable? So today I'm going to talk about what we're doing to ensure sustainability, and both what we've been doing this year and what we are planning to do beyond. And you've got some really nice photos here of what we are doing. So we collect from stores up and down the country, and we've got 2 processing facility or processing partners in FuturePost and in SaveBoard. Most of you that know me know I'm a very big football fan, so I'm going to use some footballing terminology as we go through. And I think I can best describe soft plastics as being a tale of 2 halves. So the first half started in 2015, and we started a trial, and it was just a trial with 70 stores in Auckland. And we collected the bags of soft plastic and we baled them and we shipped them off to Australia. And we grew that scheme pretty well. It expanded rapidly. So by 2018, we had 350 stores around the country, and we got to just over 500 tonnes that we were collecting in a year. And mostly we were shipping it to Australia. It was a challenging first half, and as you can see, it started brightly, but we ended the first half with a number of red cards. And when we had no overseas market for our post-consumer soft plastics, and about this time in 2018, probably it was a week before Christmas, we stopped collections. And we stopped collections because we had something that's, others will become familiar with. We had piles of soft plastics that we had nowhere to send it. So that was really the low spot of the scheme. But we've got a second half too. And the second half has been much brighter for our team. So in actually the end of 2018, but in 2019, we signed a supply agreement with FuturePost where we agreed to pay them a gate fee for the plastic that they process. And we took the decision to have a gradual restart. We started with just 37 stores in Auckland in the middle of 2019. And we had processing capacity of 10 tonnes a month. So we set up the programme so we weren't going to collect any more than 10 tonnes a month. We've gradually expanded between 2020 and now. And in that time, we've set up collection systems in different regions to collect, bale and transport. And we've also been able, with our processing partners, to increase the processing capacity. So we introduced a second line FuturePost introduced a second line in 2021. SaveBoard came on stream in 2022. And this year in July, FuturePost opened their Blenheim plant. So as we sit at the end of 2023, we've got it's actually nearly 400 collection points now. 84% of New Zealanders have got access to a recycling facility within 20 kilometres of home or work. We're collecting between 60 and 70 tonnes a month. But actually now we've got demand for over 100 tonnes a month, and it's growing. So we are in the position now of needing to increase the supply of plastic to meet the processing demand. So we've got a strong and growing membership. We started back in 2015-16 with a small group. I guess it was a coalition of the willing. It was brand owners, packaging manufacturers and retailers who agreed to participate and help fund the trial. This month, we've reached 200 members. So that's been, we're very proud to have reached 200 members. It's doubled. So 3 years ago, we had 100 members. So that is the rate of increase that we've gone through. And over a fifth of our members are now from outside the grocery sector. So it's not just a scheme for the food and grocery sector. So we are expanding, as we've said, to try and meet demand. So this year we've added 40 new store drop-off locations, and I've got to say a huge thanks to New World, Pack and Save, Woolworths and the Warehouse, who've been with us from the start, and whose stores you know, are so much an important part of what we do. We couldn't do it without you. And we do appreciate all the effort that stores put in to deliver the scheme. We've now got drop-off bins at over 290 locations, and they collect on average 1.5 tons of soft plastic per store per year. It does vary. We've got stores that collect an awful lot and stores that collect a smaller amount, but it's on average, it's been 1.5 tons per store per year. But what probably many of you don't know is we've got over 100 other collection points as well. And they are collecting, so these are range. Sorry, there's some echoing going on. I don't know whether that's me or somebody got, can you go on silent? You're not me? Let's see if that works. No, is anybody else hearing an echo or is it just me?
Yeah, can hear the echo.
Yeah, I think somebody's come on and they've got their phones not on mute.
Can you see if you can go through, Donna, and just mute them?
Sure.
Okay, so what you might not know is that we are also collecting from over 100 other locations, and you'll see there on the slide ranges from retail back of house to offices and retirement villages. And these, across these collection points, and they're also scheme members, we're collecting an average of 700 kilograms per location per annum. And as I said earlier, we've got 84% of New Zealanders now have access to recycling, and you'll see that we're gradually filling out the colours around the country. And this is our latest colour chart there. What we are seeing is that as members and brands are putting the labelling on pack, it's making it easier for us to direct people to where they should recycle as well, through either the Recycle at Store or the ARL Check Locally logos. And this is one I think we are all very proud of. Recycled in New Zealand, I'm proud of it. Future Post have the New Zealand flag flying in their plant. Our relationships with Future Post and SafeBoard are vital to the scheme. Obviously, without them, we would not have a scheme. 5 years ago, when we stopped collections, I have to say this seemed like a pipe dream to actually have 3 plants in New Zealand that would take our post-consumer soft plastics. So on the left, that's the new plant in Blenheim that Future Post opened in July, and on the right, Rob's standing at the SafeBoard plant in Hamilton. So what's interesting actually about the Waiuku plant is that the Blenheim plant is double the size physically of the Waiuku plant. They've both got the same number of production lines, 2 production lines in place, but the Blenheim plant has now got latest technology in there, which is I think probably 3 years younger than the Auckland plant, and is able to process a lot more because it's newer technology. So where we're working now is, how do we future-proof soft plastics? We're looking at, and I'll talk through this in some more detail, alternative processing technologies. So other types of, introducing advanced recycling or chemical recycling, as it might be called, and also mechanical recycling in terms of can we do film-to-film recycling. And we also need to increase the volume of the materials we collect. So, over the next year, we want to be trialing household collections, looking again at, how we increase away from home collection systems. And we're also working at the moment on, with New Zealand Post and with Future Post at introducing larger courier bags so that small businesses, commercial enterprises can actually use that system as well to recycle their soft plastics. But as I've sort of mentioned, the we've got increasing processing capacity, and we now need to increase how much soft plastic we can collect and raise the recycling rate. So we can certainly learn from overseas. The bags in the pictures here are from left to right. Belgium, where they collect plastic, metals, and drinks containers in a single bag at curbside. The middle bag is one of the bags that the UK are trialing in terms of curbside collections, and the bag on the right is the Kirby bag, which has been used and trialed in Australia. So earlier this year, I visited the sewage recycling plant in Somerset and followed the process through a day there. So what you see here from left to right again, so they are collecting soft plastic in a blue bag at curbside, and it's collected in the plastic and metals recycling bin. And they have these beautiful, absolutely beautiful source separated vehicles that you can see there. And so they collect basically in the different compartments. They collect glass in different compartments. They collect fiber, and then they collect plastic and metals. The plastic and metals go in the red one at the end that you can see, and then it gets lifted up and raised into the top, which is the green there. And all the plastic and metals sit there. Then they get to the MRF, where they get tipped, and you can see the second picture there is where they've been tipped onto the deck there. And the blue in that is the bags that are in with the rigid plastic and the cans. So then the blue bags are picked off the conveyor manually, and they're dropped down a chute. And then at the bottom of the chute, they're collected in containers, which are then moved when full to be baled. The beauty of this system is it's actually quite low cost in terms of how they manage it. They literally just put on an extra few people in the MRF to do the picking and move the containers when they need baling. So that's in comparison with fully automated systems which operate in Ireland. So Repack are the scheme in Ireland that does the collections there. So they collect completely commingled at curbside, then comes into the MRF where they separate all the plastic out through an eddy current. And then they have robots picking the soft plastic off the conveyors at the end. So if there's any soft plastic that hasn't been separated through the eddy currents, it gets picked off by the robots at the end. So in terms of looking forward as well, we have this year been working on new processing systems. So earlier in the year, Nextech Research, we commissioned them to develop circular economy solutions for New Zealand soft plastic recycling. That report is on our website. If you haven't seen it, it's probably worth a read. It effectively tells us that we need to be looking at curbside collections to increase the supply of plastic, and different options to ensure we've got sufficient processing capacity. We've also funded a feasibility study with Plastoil, and that's looking at putting in containerized pyrolysis plants, or a containerized pyrolysis plant into New Zealand, whereby the oil would then be either used locally, but more likely would be shipped off to either Australia or Asia, where it could then be used back into packaging manufacture. And recently we started talking with Pre1, who are introducing a Hydradyne mechanical processing technology in South Australia, which will clean film. So the picture on the left is what they are doing, which is purifying plastics. And the picture on the right is the Plastoil pyrolysis plant. So looking at our priorities for 24-25, we'll continue a lot of what we've been doing, working with all of you, with our members, to reduce the amount of soft plastics placed on the market, which doesn't meet our current specifications. So as you're all aware, we have material specifications which sit within the PREP tool, but also within our own New Zealand soft plastics logo system. and that's effectively 70% by weight of polyethylene and polyprop, and a balance of up to 30% of secondary materials which are accepted by our processors. If we can change the balance of what's on the market already, then we can increase what's the recovery of soft plastic, and increase and try and meet our processing capacity demand. We also want to look at how we expand our existing network of collections, so putting more into the existing network we've got and then filling in some of the gaps. As I've said, we are talking to a couple of councils about trialling curbside collections. We'd like to do one on each island, one in the north, one in the south. We have, as many of you will know, been talking through the year about doing this, and obviously I've spent some time researching what's going on overseas. The reason we haven't gone ahead this year is because of the government's policy on curbside collections, which in March said soft plastics weren't going to be allowed into curbside. We have had to work through to see whether, how we manage that through a trial system. We'll also continue to fund research into new and emerging technologies. We've got money in our budget for 24-25, which is allocated to do that. And then, of course, we need to build our scheme so it can be integrated within the mandatory plastic packaging product stewardship scheme. So looking into my crystal ball for what's next, our voluntary scheme is due to end in 2025. And all things indicate that a mandatory PPPS is not going to be ready to go until at least 2026. So we will be talking to the ministry and government about how we extend the voluntary scheme to run, ready for the mandatory scheme to start. But we have no intention of stopping what we're doing with our voluntary scheme. And we'll continue, as I've just been outlining, to build integrated solutions using our existing network and developing new networks to increase what we are recovering so that we can get more processed. This year, in the past 12 months, we've collected, I think it's about just over 700 tons of plastic. We are budgeting next year for around 1,300 tons to be processed in the next financial year, which starts 1st of April. So we have, over the past few years, been doubling year on year what we're collecting. So we know we can do it. And yeah, that's where we are sitting at the moment. So I will hand over to everyone in the room to take any questions.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you. This is Susan from EPCO. I have a question. Is your scheme purely related to soft plastics, or do you include rigid as well?
No, our scheme is just for soft plastics. So there's two things. One is the scheme that's been running since 2015 is just soft plastics. The PPPS, which I've mentioned and alluded to, that is an all of plastic scheme, which were required by the government to have in place because all of plastic packaging was stipulated to be a priority product back in 2020. But the scheme I'm talking about here is just soft plastics.
Yeah,
And
thank
you'll
you.
also be aware that there's the container return scheme legislation still sitting there, even though it's currently on hold, which was designed to deal with the majority of that rigid beverage.
Any other questions?
If okay, I might jump in. Hello, my name is Angela. I'm from the Anzac Plastics Pact. Lynn, you mentioned processing capacity in New Zealand. That capacity, do you think that with your scheme you will fill that, or is there still a gap between what you currently collecting and in the future are planning to collect and what the free processors can deal with?
So for Future Post, they allocate us 50% of their plant for our soft plastics. So they take soft plastics and HDPE, either milk bottles or janitorial. And then of the soft plastic component of that, we currently have had, well, we've had since we started, about 50% of their capacity. So we plan to, we want through our scheme to be able to collect into that space. But looking at it, they're going to need about 100, 110, 120 tons across all of that over the coming year. Saveboard's different because they take a mix of liquid paperboard and some soft plastics. So we're just building that one up. So it's a less amount, but we have across the 3 plants, we've probably got as we build up over the next few years, sufficient space for us to triple what we're doing at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly a better space than you guys are in Australia at the moment, I think it's true to say.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well done.
Life expectancy of a Future Post. They say, and I think they say it's just trying to say how long, 30 years.
Carol, you're not on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they Rob, can you, I think it's 30 years, something like that, life of Future Post. But if they are if there is a problem with them, they will take them back and they will reprocess them through the plant. And that's the same actually for Saveboard. Any of the offcuts from a board, from the board they put on the market, they'll take back and reprocess.
Can I also ask a little bit more about the trials you're running in the context of curbside recycling? So what's your experience? Any barriers at the consumer level or at the MRF level, collective level? Can you share any of those with us?
Well, we haven't actually run any trials in New Zealand yet because the framework, the government's legislative framework actually specifically said soft plastics couldn't be collected at curbside. So we've been working our way through how we get around that, and we can, because we can run trials and we can also and it will be privately funded through the scheme. But what we have done, obviously I've been keeping across the trials in Australia, but I've spent quite a lot of time looking at what's going on in the UK, where I think the results are fairly similar to Australia in that you get an uplift of 30% in terms of what you're collecting if you make it easier for the consumer. I think one of the models we've been looking at, because why reinvent the wheel, would be the bag in the bin system, which is operating, as I say, in Belgium, it's operating in the UK, it's operating in Australia in the trials there. In the UK, they've varied the trials between different weights of or different gauges of the bag. So if it's if they're in a heavy if they're in a compaction truck where it's fully commingled, they're using a heavier gauge to prevent the bag busting open. That seems to be working well. They've got trials in Newcastle, which is a big urban town city, and then where I went, which was a small Somerset environment, where the main issue was how they collected the materials with quite narrow vehicles to go down the country lanes. I think one of the things I have picked up is that we can focus in different ways, and some of the councils I've been talking to in New Zealand have actually started talking about having source separate vehicles as well. And so you can either collect it separate, and then it's quite easy when it gets to the MRF because it's already separated, or you collect it commingled. The discussions I had with the with Suez Recycling in the UK was that actually the transport costs themselves didn't change much, because if you add soft plastics into an ordinary, the collection vehicles already, they are unlikely to have it sufficient volume to push you over the edge into needing more trucks, because typically the truck is full when the glass and the fibre get in it, as opposed to when you add more plastic into it. So they found, apart from the week or so once the trial started, because people have been piling their plastic at home ready for the vehicle to come round, they haven't had any requirements to put additional resources into their fleet. So certainly looking at that, you know, how that could pan out for us. And then in terms of where we want to trial it, we've got a couple of smaller council regions who we think would be ideal to work with, and who have expressed interest in being part of a trial with us. And that's really what we want to be doing in the early part of, you know, starting that going in the early part of next year. Just checking the chat.
There's 2 questions in chat, Lynn. So both of them relate to chemical recycling capabilities operational in New Zealand. And the second one is our ambition around that. And if not, what's our opportunity to collaborate with Australia? So I think the simple answer to that is whilst we're in discussions with several organisations that are undertaking chemical and advanced recycling, we are not aware of anybody developing a commercial solution onshore here in New Zealand at present. So on that basis, we think it's still a couple of years away before someone's likely to do that. In terms of the second one, collaborating with Australia, absolutely subject to export regulations and rules. We see there is definite benefit in utilising the capacity Trans-Tasman to get economics out of whatever plants that are ultimately developed for the region. But that'll be very subject to the Plastics Treaty, etc., and how that's structured to ensure that we can move plastic between borders and not be subject to any ban. So there's work at multiple levels to make that work, but definitely in our scope of thinking, not just for the soft plastics, but also for the plastics products stewardship scheme.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, to build on that, we have been, in terms of the plastic treaty, we have been, you know, providing our input into that process that the Ministry for the Environment has been leading, in saying that we, you know, we recognise that in Europe and certainly in North America as well, they, you know, that plastic can move across their borders within the economic region. If we limit it to just being able to, you know, nothing can leave our shores, we are, you know, really seriously hindering our ability to progress going forward. So, you know, we've been very strongly advocating that there has to be a regional approach for this part of the world in terms of our movements of materials. Yeah, thanks, Christy, for just updating me there. It's a 50-year life expectancy for the post. Any more questions?
Yeah, maybe just one more. You were mentioning earlier that you have an 84% coverage rate. So the remaining 60%, 16%, maybe you can explain a little bit about barriers for potential people joining the scheme or businesses.
So the 84% is the, we work that out based on the population, the census population in areas where we have access to bins for the public. It doesn't include, we do provide courier, well, people can buy courier bags through NZ Post and other outlets and post back their soft plastics, but we don't incorporate that into our, you know, our percentages there. We do want to increase. There are a few areas that we know where we're light in. So we don't have collection facilities yet in the Manawa 2, Palmerston North, Whanganui, and we're working there on trying to find a solution, because that's the larger population areas. In terms of the more distant places, so I'm thinking the west coast of South Island, we're looking at what options do we have there. Often what we find is communities really want to have the service there, and they might find a local store that was happy to host the bin. But then we have to work to find out a logistics mechanism that gets the plastic baled and over to our processors. And when we've had, sometimes that becomes just cost prohibitive, and also the distance involved just doesn't make any sense. We've had some areas where actually putting a resource in, putting a collection system in for 3 or 4 stores costs more than an entire region, just because of the distances. So we have to sort of make some tough decisions around that. But I think with having the processing plant on South Island now, it's making life easier for us to actually justify some of the movements around the South Island. And that's probably what I mean when I say let's try and fill in some of the gaps that we've got in our network and make the existing network we've got work a bit harder. So we know there's some areas that I've got on my to-do list to get nailed early next year. And then it's about finding some solutions to some of the more distant areas. I mean, we've been looking at, could we put in bins that are compacting bins to see if we could compact the soft plastics so it's actually going to be more efficient to move around from some of these areas. So there's different things we can look at. But yeah, that's a bit of a work in progress. Anyone else with any questions? Well, hopefully that means I covered off all the questions that you all wanted to ask about what we were doing and how we were doing it and what we were going to do next. And yeah, it's, as I say, from all of us that were in the room 5 years ago when we were closing down soft plastics, I am extremely encouraged that we've grown to 200 members. We've got our processing partners or our collection partners have stayed on board with us. We've got 3 processing plants here in New Zealand, and we've got a lot of plans for next year and beyond. So yeah, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for staying with us and for being part of it. And perhaps Rob, I'll ask you to just close off the meeting.
Yes, so on behalf of the Packaging Forum, the soft plastics, thank you for the support and the interest in the soft plastics scheme, and thank you for Lynn for her efforts in keeping it all on track. Thank you. If we don't talk again, have a great Christmas and New Year, and look forward to working with you for a successful 2024. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.